Hi, dancers. I'm very excited to be back today with Conversations with the Pros, where I'm chatting with dancer Ever Larson. Hi.
Hi.
I would love for you to give us an introduction about who you are, where you dance, and, walk us along the journey of how you got to where you are now.
Yeah. So, I am a quarter ballet dancer with Colorado Ballet, and I actually have a very, I feel, rare story. I was able to stay in the company or I trained in the academy of the company that I dance with, and so I'm very lucky in that sense. So I was in the pre-professional program with Colorado Ballet Academy, um, for a few years, and then I was a trainee, so I spent half of my time with the pre-pros, and then I would go upstairs to the company for company rehearsals and then go back downstairs for academy things. And then I spent a year in the studio company, and then a year as an apprentice, which was the pandemic year.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then we
Interesting
had
year to be an
yeah,
apprentice.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then I got promoted to corps ballet at the beginning of this current season, which was very surprising because, virtual season. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Definitely an interesting time to have transitioned from the pre-professional academy to company life. That's really interesting.
absolutely. Yeah. Going from like just core rehearsals to like over Zoom, smaller, more refined rehearsals for like Giselle's friends or Moina and Zolma or Nakia for our little virtual thing. So it was definitely interesting.
How was that? Was that challenging, or did you find any new opportunities that like were helpful with doing it on Zoom, or was it just like challenging and not something you liked?
Um, it was definitely challenging. I think I benefited from it a lot though because having to learn choreography over Zoom made it easier to learn choreography in person
Yeah.
because constantly having to watch me like, okay, is this reversed? Like, how is it being mirrored on Zoom? And then noise cutting out and things like that. So I definitely appreciate having that, I think, in my back pocket. Also learning like new works over Zoom. We learned some contemporary stuff, which was really just really weird to learn, but it was definitely beneficial, I think.
Yeah, I think that raises a really good point. It's like doing something. I remember when I was training, my one of my teachers would have us do an extra amount of certain things so that when it comes time, for example, 32 fortes, it's like the 32 doesn't feel as bad type
Yeah,
of mindset. So it's like having to do this on Zoom almost makes it a little bit more easier when you're in the studio. And then, of course, you're more appreciative when you are actually in the studio, right? One thing we saw with COVID was a newborn appreciation amongst all dancers, like for the art.
yeah, absolutely. I think it really proved to everyone, all of us who stuck with it, I think how much we really need it and how much we love it, how important it is in our lives. And we saw a lot of people, especially like in their teen years, I think, realize that they don't need ballet and that's okay. And then the people who do need it, who it is, their life and their true passion, and seeing everyone like who needed to stick with it. And I think that's important. And I think we all have like a newfound, we all loved it before, but I think there's just a stronger love and a stronger passion, and we'll never take for granted, performing on a stage in front of
Yes.
a live audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now, I'm based in New York, and just in the past couple of weeks, I mean, everything has just been like deja vu with March of 2020. It's been extra hard on performing artists, which brings me to my next question for you. Along your journey, from pre-professional to professional, which of course was very much uprooted by this huge pandemic, were there instances where you just, throughout your journey just didn't feel as maybe motivated, or would you say throughout, especially being in the same setting, have you always kind of been with that same drive, or did it ever ebb and flow?
It definitely was. I went through a phase, I'd say like 3 months into the pandemic, where I just my motivation was gone. I didn't want to stop dancing. I just couldn't bring myself to have the same work ethic that I usually have. And I would just try and take a class and just lie on the ground. And it was hard because all I wanted to do was dance, but I couldn't like mentally bring myself to do it because I knew that I was so far away from being able to dance with other people. I mean, it was almost a year dancing completely alone, I think,
Yeah.
and for a lot of people even longer. But yeah, and I think that's totally normal, having that up and down and having the, I don't know, life isn't just a straight line. You have your ups and your downs, and that was definitely a rough time for me. But it made me realize just how much I do love ballet, because when I didn't dance for 2 or 3 weeks, something was missing, and I knew what it was. It was just hard to get myself back on my feet to do bar, but I
Sure.
got there, and
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a trying time for so many, like I said, performing artists, but also just so many industries in of itself. Obviously, we're pretty impacted and
Absolutely.
still are impacted. So was there ever a time through your training when you started to realize like food in general was helping you with your performance and you just like made this connection between food and performance?
Absolutely, yes. It was around the time I started doing the pre-professional training, because it's
Mm-hmm.
just so much more. I'd always trained a lot. I started homeschooling you know, when I was like 12. So I kind of was used to dancing in the morning, but there's something with the pre-professional training, and especially when you're around the companies, having that influence. Um, it, it was like a click, like, oh, food is fuel. I need, I need this. You need to put fresh oil in your car for it to work. You need to give it gas. It doesn't run without it. Like, we are, you know, a machine, and
Yeah.
you need to fuel your machine. And without the proper fuel, you break down, you get injured, you are tired. And yeah, especially to get through those long days, you need the proper fuel.
Yeah,
That's
and such a big misconception, especially in that pre-professional world, is when we start to see those food restrictions and the restrictive behaviors, because there's a misunderstanding in regards to, body ideals and what dancers should be fueling and how to fuel and making sure they are keeping up with giving their body the energy it needs. So, my next question for you is, as dancers, it's so easy for us to hyper focus on just dance. And one thing that we saw with the pandemic was a positive was that a lot of dancers were starting to introduce different hobbies into their lives just because of, the extra time on hand, not necessarily having to commute to a studio and so forth. So how are you able to, kind of keep a little bit more balance instead of having that super focused and zoned in mentality?
yeah. So I don't know. For me, as soon as I get home, I try and like shut off not shut it off, but like push aside, like, yes, you had work, things may have happened. Yes, you have a scary rehearsal tomorrow, or you have a performance, but trying to focus on time for myself that isn't related to dance. Um, like I love reading, and so that's a really good escape for me.
Yeah.
So I'll just like sit down with a good book, or just watching something on Netflix, or doing school. I'm in college, so like something that is just very, very different from ballet is a great way for me to just like block my mind, or coming home and spending time with my family who don't know anything about ballet. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's definitely hard to separate yourself from the ballet world, especially if you have like a roommate that's also a dancer, but finding something that is an escape for you. Even if ballet is your escape, there's that you can find something else too that's something that's just you
Yeah.
or your roommate or with your family, a board game, something. And I think that's, I don't know. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense, you know, especially because when we have other things in life that are unrelated to dance, it allows us to keep dance as an escape, even in of itself, you know, even though it's your work and it's your job and you obviously can't necessarily just ever like zone out in class, it can still be this form of an escape for you. I know with me, you know, when I get into the studio, it's a major, I like to say it's my psychologist. It's a major stress relief. It wasn't always like that for me because I didn't have balance at that time. You know what I mean? I was too hyper focused, and it took years for me to figure that out, to gain back that balance. And I think it's so helpful for younger dancers, especially to hear professionals in regard to what else they're doing, what other hats they're wearing in life so that they're not so hyper focused.
Yeah. And I actually didn't find that divide for myself really until the pandemic because I
Mm,
had been go, go, go for so long. So that is some silver lining with the pandemic, that I realized what I loved to do away from dance, because when you can't do the one thing that you love, you have to find something else. And
yeah.
I, picked up a book I hadn't read in so long. I used to love it. And I was like, hey, I'm going to start reading again. And I just realized that that was the perfect escape for me. I can go to a different world. I can,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. A lot of dancers, I think, experience that at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, really just being hit with that standstill. And it obviously was a struggle for many, if not most. But I'm hoping that, you know, some dancers did pick up some new hobbies for just to have a bit more balance. Do you have any pre-performance rituals that you want to share?
Um, for me, it's usually I love, like, I know some people love being like putting on headphones and like being in their own space. I love being around people.
Yeah.
I love having like a chatty environment. So I it's always very therapeutic for me to like sit down and do my hair and do my makeup just in front of the mirror. I love getting to, if it's just an evening show, and if we have rehearsals in the morning, I love just getting to the theater really early and like moving in and just making it home, and sitting and doing my makeup. And then I almost always have Cheez-Its with me, and that's always my like pre-show, like, I don't know, it's always like comforting. Extra toasty Cheez-Its. Uh,
Love.
so good.
I know,
That
so
and
good.
a coffee.
Yeah. I love that. I'm a goldfish person, but I do love Cheez-Its too. But I also love that it's giving you, you know, that extra boost in fuel as it's a carbohydrate. I also love that it's bringing in some nostalgic memories for you too. That's what it sounds like, right? It's like
Yeah.
comforting.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and that's something I want to pick apart a little bit because a lot of dancers lose touch with the in the pursuit of just wanting to be quote unquote healthy. A lot of dancers will lose touch with other aspects and other benefits that food can play in their life. You know what I mean? And like for you, cheese, it's like it's not just, you're not just eating them because they are this carbohydrate filled energy booster. You're eating them because they give you comfort. And I think there's this stigma around like comfort foods, when in fact it can probably, what it sounds like, help to ease your pre-performance nerves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having something that is special to you is important. Having like a food or a snack or even a drink that brings back a memory is always just so, or not a memory, or even just a time in your life is
Yeah.
so like lovely. It's so wonderful to have with you. It makes it definitely eases a pre-performance nerves.
That's not something that I've heard often from dancers. So I'm loving that we're talking about this, just the benefit of comfort food, and how that can even play into a performance as something as small as this, you know what I mean? Just to help your nerves beforehand, I think is really awesome. I love that.
Yeah, it's something that, I don't know, it's something so simple too. It's so just, it's so small, but it's just very important. And it's, I don't know, it is very comforting. It's very, it does ease everything. Yeah, it's special. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And it is small in regards to the comfort you're getting from like something as specific as like Cheez-Its, but all of these small little relationships that we have with food really do add up to our larger perspective relationship with food. And for a lot of dancers who again are struggling with their relationship with food, it's those little instances that they lose over time because of food rules. So just something as small as what you're doing with your pre-performance ritual, I think is hopefully as a lot of young dancers are going to listen to this and hear that and just feel a little bit more reassured that food can be a friend. It doesn't have to be an enemy to a dancer's performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to throw a pretty big question at you. It's a loaded question, but I just love to see where you'll take it. How would you define what it means to be the healthy dancer?
Ooh, okay. um, I think a healthy dancer is different for everyone. I think that's a big part of it. A healthy dancer is someone who is able to differentiate themselves from other people, because we are all different, we are all special, and no one is the same. And I think a healthy dancer is someone who can step outside of ballet, and I think have their own personal life. And even if all of your friends are from work, it's still important to have those experiences in life outside of ballet. So going out to dinner or drinks with your friends, or even, like I said, coming home and doing something with your family. I think that's a healthy dancer, someone who can separate that part of their life, and still it can be together, it can still be the same, but finding a way to differentiate work from yourself. Yeah. You are not just a ballerina. Yeah. You are not just a dancer. You are a person who loves movies, or a person who loves hiking or driving. I don't know, random things, but finding the other things inside of yourself that aren't just ballet.
Yeah. And by the way, at the end of the day, all of those other experiences can be brought back to the stage in a way that just adds depth to a dancer's ability to transcend an audience into a story. It's like if we're just if there is no diversity, if there is no depth in our lives, then it's not going to be such a fun performance, right? It's just going to be a blank slate, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at like someone who plays Giselle, or someone who can do Black Swan, who can play Odile and Odette. They're people who have a lot of experiences in their life. They've dealt with heartbreak, or they know how to be deviant, and I think if you're just ballet, you don't experience some of those other experiences outside of ballet, because you are a normal person with their 9-to-5 desk job, and then go home and only think about their 9-to-5 desk job. They go home to their families, they go home to their friends, they go home to their roommates, and they do their own things. So why should ballet be any different?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. And I definitely see with a lot of younger dancers, I know I experienced this myself, that big misunderstanding of thinking that in order to make it in this industry, you have to eat, live, breathe, and sleep ballet. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to take away from the motivation and the determination that is needed. But at the end of the day, dancers need balance in their lives, and it's only going to benefit them in the long run.
Absolutely. I had a couple of years where everything was just pinpointed towards ballet. There was nothing else. Nothing happened in my life. I only saw people at the studio, and then I came home, and then I went back to the studio. There was nothing else. And yeah, that was beneficial towards my overall goal, but it's not sustainable for a long period of time, because you need to take those mental and physical breaks from ballet.
Yeah, just as a way to prevent burnout.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ever, thank you so much for chatting with me today. This has been wonderful. You've given us such great insight.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved this.
Yes, so we will be in touch.